So we're not the only ones like that.
The February 24th meeting of the East Penn Board of School Directors is hereby called to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First order of business is a report of the High School Student Government Association representatives Grace Comfort and Caitlin Senses.
Good evening. I would first like to start out with the Snow Code dance update. SGA helped to put together 2 successful winter dances, the underclassmen dance on February 8th and the upperclassmen dance on February 22nd. Next, I would like to give a congratulations to Stefania and Pandora Schoen, who earned 7 regional awards from the Scholastic Art and Writing Competition.
I would also like to congratulate the students in the January Student of the Month. Marielle Gonzalez for art, Glenn Graham for commitment to academic excellence, Haley Freed for computer and business application, Matthew Whitmer for computer science, Taya Van Lindy for English, Harry Lynn for ESL, Abby Hark for health and driver's ed, Victoria Kramer for mathematics, Reese Williams for music, Olivia Omernick for science, Lauren Shuck for social studies, Paula Toka for tech ed, Bryn Daly for wellness and fitness, and Zachary Bernhardt for world language.
Congratulations are also in order to our LCTI students who finished in the top 3 at Skills USA District 11 Championships in Allentown. First place finishers qualified to compete at the state competition this spring in Hershey. These students include Peter Baxton, Jeffrey Confer, Gabe Helmer, and Cody Feiger. In the latest 9th grade experience podcast, discussion was held with some of the players from the freshman boys basketball team. The boys talked about being 20-1 during the regular season and winning a season-ending tournament, while also outscoring the team on an average of 28 points per game. They also discussed how they came together as a team and learned to work together. Finally, I would like to acknowledge the 23 students going to the Pennsylvania Music Educator Association Region 5 Course Festival on February 27th through the 29th at Eastern York Senior High School. The festival will feature more than 200 of the best high school singers from 15 counties in Pennsylvania.
For the athletics, for diving, Brenda McCourt won the District 11 championship while breaking the pool record once again. For boys swimming, they won the EPC championship and won the District 11 championship by beating Parkland. Girls swimming placed second against Parkland in the District 11 championship. And for wrestling, Caden Wright and Jared Groller placed third in individuals at districts and will move on to regionals. The team finished third among 33 teams at the District 11 JV tournament. Caden Wright was selected to the East Penn Conference All-Star team. And for girls basketball, Alyssa Burkhart was Coordinated Health Athlete of the Week. And that's all. Thank you.
Are there any questions for our SGA representatives? Well, thank you very much for your report. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. You're also welcome to go home and get some sleep for your classes tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to requests to address the board, I have one request from Christopher Dujon of Makunji on the turf football field and scoreboard.
Hello again. Thank you for having me. We're really looking forward to this evening and getting final approval of the turf field. We are very thankful to Lehigh Valley Health Network and their substantial investment in the community with the field. I think it's become clear from many of the discussions we've been having over the past several meetings that this field would not have happened without them stepping up to support this. We did want to address the scoreboard issue, which I know has been kind of a question since the previous meeting when it was revealed. it got us to thinking, why was it in the original agreement? And it was in the original agreement, I think, because it was seen as an important piece of the advertising and the branding. And so it led me to do a quick Google search. And what I uncovered was an article from the Morning Call from Sarah Wojcik from May of 2018, where it talked about Nazareth and their new scoreboard and the advertising opportunities that they got from it. Their scoreboard was substantially more than ours, I will acknowledge. They were they did about $160,000 scoreboard, which we would not have to do, but they did generate $61,000 the first year in advertising on that. So they estimated within 3 to 4 years that they would pay off the cost of their scoreboard. So I do think that there is a substantial opportunity to fulfill the mission and the vision of originally having the scoreboard as a piece of this project and generate long-term revenue for the district. I think there was the idea that the football community could fundraise for it, and I suppose. I did want to acknowledge that the Green Hornet Touchdown Club, of which I'm part of, does already raise a substantial sum of money to help in the operations of the football team. As the former president of the Girls Basketball Booster Club, I know that all booster clubs do that. It's just that in football, it is really at a different level. So I do not think that there are the resources within our community to fundraise for that amount of money. So for that and for the long-term advertising opportunities, I think it presents, we are requesting that it be a part of the project. If it is not a part of the project, we do request that it be put into the capital budget. The capital budget is laid out for 3 or 4 years, but I know you are going through the capital budgeting process, and there's a feeling that if it is not put into the capital budget, it will never get done. And I think with the revenue opportunity and the reasonable cost of it that would allow some advertising, there is a real opportunity for the district. I do recognize that you face a lot of difficult choices here. I stayed at the meeting and I heard about, kind of not being in compliance and unfunded mandates, and I recognize, which is why I think we should be grateful when we have opportunities for things to be funded by partners like Lehigh Valley Health Network, or just become self-funding themselves through something like advertising. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. DeJean. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes. May I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion is passed. Moving on to budget priorities. Mrs. Campbell.
Okay, as a continuation of our budget priorities, again, we just always begin with a reminder about what our goal is as we work through the budget process and planning for 2020-21 school year. In particular, we're always looking to expand educational opportunities for our students while being very mindful of the financial health of the district. And this evening's presentation in particular is going to focus on that third item right there, which is the continuation with implementation of elementary literacy resources. I will start off by highlighting that the total budget request for 2020-21, specifically for the literacy resources, is approximately $220,000. And before we now dive into those literacy resources in a bit more detail, I wanted to also bring to the board's and the community's attention, in particular, the behavior support interventionist position that we discussed at the last meeting. There was a question from the board regarding a potential disconnect between the proposed salary that we had for that position and the actual certification and credentials. And so we appreciate the board's careful investigation of that and agreed that potentially our original salary for that position was a bit low. And you can see we've adjusted that by about $10,000, which then did change slightly our total district priorities. So that was just a little bit of a step backwards before we now move ahead and focus for the rest of the evening on the literacy resources. This particular graphic, for those of you who were with us in previous years, should look somewhat familiar. In particular, this really is intended to provide the board with an overview of the literacy program that we follow in East Penn. In particular, you see the two key components of a literacy program, which are, in particular, that reading strand, which is highlighted on the top line, so to speak. It includes instructional strategies such as interactive read aloud, shared reading, guided reading, and independent reading. And when you look at those items on this graphic, you can consider those somewhat in a continuum in terms of interactive read aloud being very teacher directed. And as we move across that continuum, eventually independent reading being very student directed. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those components of reading in just a minute. And then certainly you see the other component of a literacy program is writing. And again, while our presentation this evening is really focusing on those reading resources, we wanted you to understand that when we talk about a literacy program or language arts, as sometimes our students refer to it, we really are talking about those two components. And so as we look at having a basic understanding of these components, the purpose for providing that overview is really so that as we then look into what exactly we're wishing to purchase for the upcoming school year, that you have an understanding of how the components of literacy are connected to those actual resources or materials that we're talking about. And the other piece that I want to emphasize here is ultimately, at the heart of what we believe in East Penn is that solid instruction is really of primary importance, and how those resources are actually used with students then is a result of high-quality professional development around those high-quality instructional strategies. So when we talk about interactive read aloud, this is, again, a very teacher-directed process, and typically the teacher would read aloud from a resource, and the students are then actively listening as their teacher models strategies and skills that will then be the focus of other lessons. And there's also an opportunity for the teacher to then engage students in their comprehension skills by asking questions, potentially what we sometimes refer to as the teacher in the model of thinking aloud as he or she is reading the text. When we talk about shared reading, again, we begin to now blend students and give them some responsibility in the instructional process. And so shared reading is a process in which the teacher, as well as the students, now have literacy resources or texts in their hands. And so the teacher, again, is directing or facilitating that process, but now the students are actually joining in the reading process and themselves are reading and practicing some of those skills and strategies that might be the focus of the lesson. And I also mentioned typically shared reading, when we think of those literacy resources, shared reading would typically be done using grade level material. So that would be that core instruction where we want all students in second or third grade to be reading that grade appropriate material. When we then think about guided reading as part of a literacy program, this is where students are working in small instructional groups. I'm going to say typically around 5 or 6 students who are reading at the same instructional reading level. We've determined that reading level through an assessment that would be administered, and we monitor students' growth on their instructional reading level. So the students who are working in that small group all typically have the same instructional level text, and the teacher is there guiding or facilitating that reading process, hearing each student read independently, and then providing follow-up prompts and instruction as necessary for individual and small groups of students. And then finally, when we think about independent reading, that is a situation in which we have students who are doing just that. They have a text or a resource that is on their independent reading level. So it's a level that, again, we've determined through assessment, and we know that those students will be successful in terms of reading and comprehending that material independently. So as we think about that continuum of reading or thinking about the framework of reading, the goal really was just to provide you with a high-level overview so that when we talk about those resources, you can understand where they might fit in this framework. We wanted to also provide the board with a quick glimpse of the resources, the literacy resources that we've purchased as part of the 2019-20 school year. And we appreciate the fact that the board asked the question at a very recent meeting, how are things going with those reading resources from the perspective of not only how are they, what is teachers' feedback potentially, but perhaps even more importantly, or equally as important, how are students performing with regard to their reading based on having some time now with the new resources. And so Mr. Povolitis is going to give us a quick glimpse of not only those resources that we've purchased, but also talk a little bit about some of the feedback and data that we have.
Okay, thank you. So just taking a look up here, you see it looks purplish or blue, the benchmark assessment system, what we call the BAS, is what Mrs. Campbell spoke about in guided reading, which is one specific component of our literacy program. For there, you need to know what the student's instructional level. So this assessment provides us with that. It's a one-on-one assessment that the teacher does with the student. We were able to, last year, thank you to the board, able to purchase the benchmark assessment system for kindergarten, and then we purchased it for first grade. Along with that, we finished out all of the needs in first grade with the independent reading resources, the guided reading books, interactive read aloud, shared reading texts, and the phonics components, all within the Fontes and Pinnell literacy program. So we were able to do that. And so, of course, the next question would be, okay, so you have a year of implementation. How did we do with that? So moving to the next slide, we're very fortunate to present some pretty successful data here. And so you take a look on the left up there, you have the 18-19 first grade average reading score. And so taking a look at that, so essentially in 9 months, they went from 38.57 as an average reading score in August to 49.43 in May. 10.86 points of growth. If you look over to 1920, so this is the year where they were using the materials that were purchased last year in first grade, they went from 42.43 to 69.14. So that's 26.57 points of growth. And you can see in just 3 months, if you compare that to the previous year without the resources. Another point that's important is looking at August of 1920, 42.43 is where the first grade students started. If you think back, kindergarten started with the first phase of using these resources. And so the students that were coming into first grade started higher than the previous year. And that was after a full year of implementation of those resources. So this is really, for us, we're really happy with this data. Clearly, the resources tied together with the strong professional development. I know we have some of our professionals from the Curriculum Instruction Office here tonight, and they've done an amazing job planning and facilitating the professional development that goes along with this. But the resources, of course, we feel like that we can say that we're proud of this data and look forward to the future of what we're recommending in the budget for this year.
So when we look ahead to 2021 in terms of intended purchases, our goal would be to purchase instructional resources as well as assessments in second, third, and fourth and fifth grade. Again, you see components of the literacy framework that we discussed reflected there with regard to the very teacher-directed shared reading resources ranging to the guided reading and finally the assessment system that would then provide us with detailed information regarding students' instructional reading levels. With regard to the outcome of the literacy resources, Continuing to implement these resources would provide us with consistent research-based literacy resources for our students K through 5. It will also provide us with a standardized assessment system that will identify instructional and independent reading levels that teachers can then use to plan instruction and monitor student growth. As we discussed, it provides us with leveled readers for independent and small group reading, as well as instructional resources for that whole group instruction that happens as well. And finally, hopefully you notice that phonics instruction is a part of our reading program as well, and is certainly part of the process at each of those points in the literacy framework. The total cost for the resources for 2020-21 is approximately $220,000, again, which would be allocated to the resources that are highlighted for you in red. To give you a sense of where we're going, there is a small component of resources that we have not yet purchased, and the intent would be that potentially for 2020-21, so this is now looking ahead, you can see that we have some independent and shared reading resources, in particular for our intermediate grades. Sometimes in those grades, we refer to the guided reading potentially as more book clubs, and so these would be some additional resources to finish out our intermediate grades for those book clubs. So when we think about phasing in resources, certainly that's strategic for multiple reasons, one of which is so that we could stagger professional development and phase in a change over time. The other piece is certainly as we look at the financial impact of purchasing very important instructional resources, but certainly resources that we recognize have an impact on the financial status of the district. And so certainly first and foremost, that phasing in is instructional and professional development, and then secondary, just looking at phasing in that expense over time. As Mr. Povolitis mentioned, certainly he and I are here, and we have some other valuable members of our C&I team should you wish to delve into any components of the resources or have any additional questions this evening.
Kowski?
So it's encouraging to see how the kindergarten and first grade improvement as a result of these resources. A couple of questions then for future grades. One, are these resources a package deal that we need all of them, or are there some that might still be useful to continuing with their reading literacy and improvement? Two, without these, do you feel that there's a potential that the students' reading achievements might stumble or struggle or not continue on the level that they were progressing from kindergarten through first grade? And that kind of ties into my next is, what we're doing today not enough to continue with their progressing with their reading abilities?
Can you, I jotted down your questions. Can you just further explain what you mean by package deal in terms of purchasing the resources in a package?
You've got 5, so for second and third grade, you have 5 items here. Mm-hmm. And I assume that the $220,000 is allocated according to each of these items, and then the 3 for fourth and fifth. Are there certain components there that you feel are needed, or are these, is this kind of the gold-plated, this is the best program we can get here?
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Yes. And Doug and or Tricia and Aaron are also here. But we've certainly have looked at the resources and identified ultimately the resources that we need. And so the ones that you see here for second, third, and fourth and fifth grade, you'll notice what this allows us to do is to then have consistent, in particular, those guided reading resources, which are those leveled readers in which students are working in small groups on their instructional reading level with a teacher. And so those resources are an incredibly valuable part of a student's literacy development. And then the other critical piece is that you'll see that assessment system. So what this would allow us to do is by next school year, we would have a consistent literacy assessment system that we would be using K to 5. So that's the first piece. The other piece is your second question about reading achievement. I will share that as part of last year's presentation, we talked a little bit about in terms of what resources are teachers currently using. And so in the intermediate grades, particularly possibly second, third, fourth, and fifth grades, where we don't have the Fontes and Pinnell resources. In 2008, we purchased Harcourt Storytown, which was a resource that we have implemented many, many years ago. That particular reading system that we have is not aligned to standards based on as you can appreciate, the date of it. And so as a result, many teachers have with very good intention, have then gone and identified instructional resources that they have used in place of current resources that aren't necessarily meeting their needs. And so it is very likely that we don't have consistent resources in some of those other grade levels. So certainly that would be a focus for us.
And how do our reading achievements measure with state standards or the corresponding grades?
When you say how do our reading achievements, are you referring to potentially standardized assessment?
Are students reading? Are we able to measure our students reading at the levels that they should be, as currently being taught?
We have, in terms of achievement measures that we can look at, certainly we can look at a PSSA. I will say that our third grade overall proficiency level is comparable to the state. However, we've had conversations before about a PSSA being one particular achievement test that doesn't necessarily tell us a whole lot about students' reading abilities. And because of the fact that currently now, in second, third, fourth, and fifth grade, we have a different assessment system. We have like parallel assessment systems happening right now in terms of reading. So we're using one assessment system for certain grade levels and a different assessment system for other grade levels. So it becomes really hard potentially to answer your question in terms of, I predict that it would be a deficit for our students to have to go from having really successful results preliminarily with Fontes and Pinnell resources and to then go into grade levels in which we know we just don't have those robust resources available for students. But that's a non-scientific projection. That's me as an educator telling you my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, are we seeing trends that are troubling to us as far as our students' achievements? And, sorry.
Go ahead.
And why this system, have we seen this utilized in other schools? Why are there other systems we could use?
Sure, and I'm going to have Erin Murphy. You may have met her before. She is our humanities supervisor from our curriculum instruction office. So she works very closely with our English language arts teachers. And I hear you asking the question not only in terms of potential impact on achievement, but the question about, in essence, I heard you say, like, why this resource as opposed to others. So Erin can also talk a little bit about somewhat of the vetting and the research process that we've gone through.
Sure. So I don't have all of our fourth and fifth grade data right in front of me right now, but what I can share with you is that we have a percentage of students that are still reading below grade level, and so part of our MTSS framework, which is our multiple tier system of instruction essentially, is we need to make sure that we're screening our students and that they're performing at grade level. And I would say that we have enough students performing not at grade level that while we're above the state's average and we're above the norm for our assessment system, which is the FastBridge assessment system, that it's enough for us want to invest additional time and attention in this matter. And part of the full day kindergarten program, they vetted literacy systems. And ultimately, that team chose for our primary grades the Fountas and Pinnell Literacy Classroom, which is the materials that you see in front of you, and saw the significant growth that our students have made using those materials. As a follow-up to that committee's decision, we then pulled together our intermediate teachers at the beginning of this school year, and using the research from Ed Reports and What Works Clearinghouse, we then brought in the sample programs that were considered the most high quality based on those reports. And the committee that came together to vet those materials ultimately chose the Fountas and Pinnell materials again. So we sort of put the choice back to the committee. We created a rubric that was based on our beliefs about literacy. So Mrs. Campbell showed you sort of our literacy framework, also the portrait of a graduate, and then obviously the ability to meet state standards. So sort of all three of those things were what we used to decide whether or not which program we wanted to move forward with. So ultimately, that was the resource that was chosen by two separate committees in the district, using those as our lenses.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Did you have another question?
No, that's.
Dr. Munson?
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, first of all, congratulations to you and your team. I mean, these are remarkable numbers. I haven't done the math, but it looks to me like it's a year over year, 250% improvement in 3 months compared to in 1/3 the time. So that's pretty remarkable, and it's hard for me to imagine that it's based completely on just this new material, but everything that the district is doing is clearly better than it was doing before. And one suggestion I have, it would be extremely useful to revisit this, if only briefly, a year from now, to see what these numbers are for this same cohort, which is our first cohort of students who are going through the process. So I hope we can do that. I have a couple questions. The first is, if we only bought the benchmark assessment system this year, how do we have comparable numbers for the previous year?
So the benchmark assessment system is the assessment that Mrs. Campbell was referring to when she was talking about our guided reading score, or our guided reading levels, and determining what a child's instructional level, where their instructional level was. The score that you see on, that was in the graph, and that we're using for comps right now, is actually from FastBridge, which is our universal screener. So when you think about sort of our levels of assessment that we have in the district, we have a screener, which is sort of this is how we capture and make sure no kids are falling through any cracks. And the screener is also administered online. So it sort of takes away the user error or perhaps subjectivity of a teacher-provided assessment. The BAS is an assessment that's given with a teacher and a student one-on-one. It's a very personalized reading assessment. So those are two different assessments, essentially, is the answer to that question.
Great. The other thing that would be useful to know is whether or not the variance has changed across students, because it would help us understand whether or not the new system was better providing the more differentiated needs, and therefore helping a wider spectrum of students. Presumably, it's just a matter of math to calculate the variance, and whether or not it's more or less than it was year over year. Mm-hmm. The other question I had was, when you introduced this, in the beginning of your presentation, you said that the board had asked for some feedback on how things were doing. You mentioned the results for students. You also mentioned sort of what the teaching staff felt, but you didn't actually include that in the presentation. So have you collected any systematic information about how the teachers who are actually implementing this program have experienced it?
So we have not like formally collected data like through a survey. However, feedback unanimously, like in our meetings, is focused on, we repeatedly hear teachers say, I feel like I'm a better teacher of reading now. So one of the things, so sort of like one of the knocks that many programs get is like it's scripted and the teachers are just, in fact, one of the reasons that we didn't move forward with any of the other programs that were highly recommended by Ed Reports was that they were very like workbook heavy, and it was more like the teacher was following a script, and on day 2, you're on page 22, and these materials very much teach the teacher what to look for in their students' behaviors, their reading behaviors, and then how to respond to it. So the materials themselves actually facilitate the teacher being a stronger teacher. So that's the feedback that we got from teachers. And you may have noticed, in fact, that we've included 4th and 5th grade in our purchase, which was not necessarily our full plan going into this. However, the 4th and 5th grade teachers, having now experienced their kindergarten and 1st grade colleagues talking about these materials and how powerful they have been, essentially were begging for the resources. And could we get them sooner? And is there a way we could get them sooner? And so that's why we've actually included 4th and 5th grade in this plan.
Okay, that seems great. Another question. So at the very end, you suggested another, and you described it as small additional purchase that might be for next year. Why is that not in the current year? And what is your, I mean, is this another $200,000 small, or?
Yeah. Sorry, that was in my notes, which you didn't see. It's approximately $80,000.
Okay.
Thank you for asking that question. Yeah.
And
the primary reason for not including it here, in terms of 2021 purchases, that was really trying to financially spread out the resources in several years.
Great. And then what I think is my last question, what mix of sort of actual physical materials versus digital materials are represented by this purchase?
It's all physical materials. There's an online component so that if a teacher, I was explaining that there's like there's these menus that the teachers use to make decisions about what their students needs. The teachers could access those online. However, the materials come with a physical copy that they would use during an instruction.
Okay, so all the students are doing the reading with physical pages.
Mm-hmm.
But, okay, great, thank you.
Dr. Levinson?
Thank you. I have 2 questions. You seem to indicate that, I guess, Storytown was purchased in 2008, and it's, from what it sounds like, it was becoming less useful and less compliant to what you're looking for, or maybe has approached a decade in terms of age. What do you anticipate these F&P resources? How long do you think they'd be in service?
The one piece that I'll start off by saying is, having been an elementary principal at the time that we purchased the Harcourt resources, certainly a significant number of the resources at the time were much more of a single reading book, in that all students had the same reading book that had stories. And so certainly I believe there was much more whole group direct instruction. We did at the time purchase some leveled resources, but not nearly as much as what I know we're purchasing now. So Erin's going to go into a little bit more detail, but again, I think like high level overview, what we're looking at is actual instructional resources that are leveled, and what the resources that you might have as a reader would be significantly different from potentially what your peers on either side of you might be reading.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to take away from the materials themselves is that they are not, to a large extent, materials that some publisher was sitting like toiling over and then distributed. These are authentic trade books written by real authors that you could walk into Barnes & Noble and pick up off the shelf. The difference is that researchers and literacy experts then have gone through the books and have determined what appropriate teaching points are. The other, I think, huge highlight of the materials themselves is that they represent a large breadth of diversity in all different aspects, and really, really, I think, support our district's approach to equity and the kind of materials that we're putting in front of our students.
Okay, so I guess you might anticipate being able to use these resources for longer than 10 years. And what it sounds to me also is that these materials, because they're real materials, not necessarily tailored for a specific purpose, if the objectives of the education were to change, you might still be able to fit these physical resources into how things are taught?
Yes.
So we could see 15, I don't know, 15, 20 years, but basically get a lot more out of the investment than what we had.
Yeah, essentially, they're good, high-quality books that, yes, if the standards changed, if the state came out next week and said, we're changing the state standards, you could easily teach any appropriate teaching point into these materials, into these books.
All right, so the flexibility is a big selling point
Yes.
here. Okay, my second question, and I think much of it's been kind of answered in different parts of your presentation. So there are three cohorts that were subdivided in terms of these resources, K1, 2, 3, and 4, 5. So in looking at this, I immediately thought, all right, well, 3 groups, 3 stages, or three years of implementation. I know you mentioned that, the 4th and 5th grade teachers are chomping at the bit to try and get some of this in there now, so I can see why there's an incentive to pull it in. But out of curiosity, what's the share of the $220,000 that wants to be spent that attributed to 4, 5, and then if we couple that with the 80, and I'm just trying to get an idea of what the general expenditure might be.
Do you know it offhand? If not, we can get.
I don't remember the exact.
We can certainly itemize it and,
Okay.
and provide you that follow-up.
Okay,
I don't want to misquote it here without having the numbers in front of
Okay,
us.
that'd be interesting to know. And so, and again, you've touched on some of the things, but perhaps you can reiterate the case for not waiting to defer all 4, 5 expenses to the 21-22 school year?
In terms of not waiting, certainly when we look at the incredibly positive results we've had at very early stages of implementation, also thinking about, again, I think the feedback that Erin has shared with regard to teachers really longing for high-quality instructional resources to use in their classrooms.
I think the other big piece that I know you're all aware of is that we're really focusing on improving our assessment and grading practices. So we're at this place where teachers want to do a better job reporting out to parents and to families and to students themselves how they're progressing. So we were sort of at this place like, do we want to continue to revise our assessments based on the materials that we currently have, knowing that we want to replace those materials? Or if we can move forward with this purchase, then we could be revising our assessments based on these materials.
I'm sorry, one follow-up question would be, what would be the, is there an internal expense that we have to consider in terms of training the teachers? Because now instead of, again, you have K1, now we're going to have 4 grades worth of teachers we have to bring up to speed.
There are no additional PD costs.
Okay, that's great,
That's
thank you.
what Dr. Gutman and I are here for.
Okay, all right, very good, thank you.
Ms. Bowman?
Thank you for this presentation. I'm going to guess you won't know the answer to this question. That's fine. I'm curious to just have it at some point. I'm very interested in the jump in reading literacy that you're showing on slide 8. And several meetings ago, we also had a presentation about the Future Ready Index and how we're struggling with low-income students who speak English as a second language, and maybe a few other groups. And I would love to see this broken down to know how these resources are affecting the students who we are struggling the most to reach and to help. And again, I'm assuming you don't have the answer to that question now, so that's okay. I did have a question about, I guess, 5th grade. When do kids just read books versus prescriptive texts?
That's my favorite question. I'll jump right back in. So can I go backwards on your slide? Oh, thanks. So as Mrs. Campbell pointed out, independent reading is a clear part of all of our reading instruction. So every day, teachers and students are expected to be reading books that are of high interest and for enjoyment. So that's really what that independent reading piece is for. You could walk into one of our kindergarten classes tomorrow, and you would see students curled up in their little chairs reading an independent choice book, something that looked good to them, and they picked it up off the shelf. The same expectation is present in our intermediate classes too. Certainly, when we get into the higher grades, we begin to struggle a little bit more with students' willingness to read. So really having highly engaging books and being able to talk about books that you're reading becomes a huge motivator for our students. So that second purchase that we're referring to for 4th and 5th grade for the next school year, that would be adding on to our book club collection, which is really, it replaces the shared reading component of our instructional model here, where students really start to take over control of their book discussions and how they discuss and facilitate their own conversations. You may have heard the term literature circles used before, and some students have like mixed feelings about those. One of the things that kids hate about literature circles is that your teacher or your team creates like these arbitrary stopping points. One of the things that is really promoted in Fountas Pinnell's book clubs is that it's more authentic to a real book club in that you read your book and then you go and talk about it. So like you read the book in its entirety, just like a real book club would do. So that's what that second section is for. So independent reading occurs in book club, which is also a choice book, and then independent reading, which should be happening every single day in every single classroom, K to 12.
I think that all sounds great. It wasn't exactly, I was just wondering, do we have a percentage of kids in 5th grade who are reading above grade level who would be like, you handed them one of these books and they would just be like, this is boring?
Now I understand your question.
Yes.
So you're talking more about when you bring them to the guided reading
Like
table.
they're already reading Harry Potter, I don't really know what
Sure.
but
So then that's where, so like, for example, level Z is like the highest level that Fountas Pinnell's materials go up to. And what we have found is that we actually have very few kids reading at that reading level because unlike some other leveled reading where it only looks at fluency and decoding, Fountas and Pinnell requires a very high level of comprehension, synthesis, and analysis in their leveling. So those books, those level Z books, really are very, very highly engaging. That was actually one of the concerns we had about the book. So we purchased a few sets for 5th grade and 4th grade to pilot. And the teachers who are piloting them actually, I just got an email yesterday about it, talking about, oh my God, this book is so exciting. I actually had kids that were like lingering on the outside of my guided reading circle because they wanted to be part of the guided reading group, even though I wasn't meeting with their group right now. So I hear you, and I thought that was going to be an issue, but we have not found it to be the case.
Okay, that's great. Sorry, I just have to remember what I wanted to know. Okay. And then, given the budget presentations that we had and how this currently isn't worked into the budget, what I was wondering as I was watching this was if we could look at the costs of just doing the immediate year, I think it would be 2nd grade, so that the kids who had the kindergarten and 1st grade resources, at least when they move into 2nd grade, they stay with the same resources. And then a year after that, we could look at 3rd grade and move on that way. And I realize that situation is not ideal, but in a year where we're already at the index and we don't have anything left over, I'm curious to know if at least that much we could find the funding for in the budget.
I think that goes with Dr. Levinson's question in terms of pricing out each of the grade levels, which we can come back with at a future board meeting.
And then the last question is just a budget question, because where the money comes from is always a little confusing to me. What pot of money do the reading resources fall under when you're budgeting it out? For example, the football field comes under capital projects. What does this come under?
It just comes under our general operating budget.
General operating.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, and that's it. Thank you.
Ms. Winch?
I just want to say thank you so much for this great data, and I'm so glad that your teachers are feeling like better teachers, that these are physical materials, that these are organically assessments that are happening. I think that's fantastic. I think we largely rely too much on computer data and spreadsheets, and I think that's wonderful. My kids have gone through lots of different curriculums with being little guinea pigs at a charter school a little while ago. And I wonder if there's any downside to changing the curriculum, particularly in the 4th and 5th grade, when they're already kind of at this set pace, so to speak, and then changing it up. I mean, I can certainly see the benefits, but could there be downsides too?
The one piece I will share is that, just to clarify, in terms of when we talk about a literacy framework, so those components, that is a model that we've been following in East Penn. The curriculum is not being revised.
Okay.
But when we talk about the instructional resources, so the materials that we're putting in the hands of kids to engage in the reading, that's the difference
Okay.
here.
And I want to echo what Alyssa Bowman just said about the historically underperforming kids and special needs kids, as special education kids are also using this assessment, would be using this assessment?
The BAS, yes.
Yes. Okay. And I would agree with her. I think I'd love to see the breakdown with those kids to make sure that we are really hitting the kids that most need it, and not just like super dupering the kids that are already excelling. Thank you. Thanks.
Do you have?
Mine have been answered, thank you.
I just have a few comments. My other board members asked some of the questions I had. I would like to comment on, I was glad to hear the result of Dr. Munson's question that the assessment you provided was a consistent assessment from year to year and wasn't the one associated with the program, so that makes the results all the more impressive. I also appreciate your decision to request to accelerate the introduction of the results and not just follow a cohort. I know there are other cases where we're introducing resources with a cohort to balance financial and educational interests, and in a case where you saw tremendous benefits from accelerating that, I think that's what we want to hear, because that's what we need to improve our schools. And finally, I'd like to just also comment on, I appreciate the focus on what's most beneficial, the most beneficial resources, and giving us a heads up on what might be coming in the future, but what didn't make the cut for this year. I'm sure as we progress in the budget process, we'll be looking at all of these with respect to the other district priorities that we've already heard of and we'll hear from, and trying to figure out what makes sense and where we are in the budget, and that's very helpful. So I want to applaud you and thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate the feedback, and I just want to conclude by saying, as I hope we articulated throughout the presentation, ultimately, high-quality instructional resources are most effective when they're implemented by high-quality educators and successful implementation. And so I applaud our classroom teachers, as well as our building leaders, and of course, our administrators who lead our literacy implementation. Erin Murphy, who passionately answered many of your questions this evening, and I'm sure you heard that come through loud and clear, as well as Dr. Tricia Gutman, who's in the audience as well. So I wanted to recognize their efforts. Thanks.
Thank you. now move on to the report of our superintendent of schools, Mrs. Campbell.
Yes, as we continue with high school scheduling, we recently completed, as you know, the middle school and the high school course selection process. And so at this point in the year, we're excited to share that we have approximately 50 students enrolled in our JASPER program for the 2020-21 school year. And so I just let parents know and students of current eighth graders and their parents know that if there are any students who are still interested in learning more about that program, certainly they can reach out to their building administrator and/or to district administration, and we're certainly happy to help them enroll in that program. I'm also excited to share that East Penn is continuing our partnership with Muhlenberg University to establish a program evaluation for Jasper Learning Initiative. And Dr. Erica Bagley, who has been a part of our secondary school start time task force. She is also continuing to work with us, and she has partnered with us and recently received a $4,000 grant to help fund this work. So in terms of what the evaluation criteria are, we have not established them just yet, but certainly we'll bring that forward to the board. I wanted to share that opportunity. Similar to, I believe some of our student reps highlighted some of the amazing accomplishments of our students, and so I think one of these might be a repeat, but congratulations to Emmaus High School senior Reese Williams, who was recently named a Lehigh Valley Music Award scholarship recipient. In addition, the What's So Cool About Manufacturing contest, you might recall at our last meeting, we had our middle school representatives from those clubs here to share their videos. And so tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. at Steel Stacks is the award ceremony. So we're excited to see the videos and see the results of all the student team participants. And I believe as well, the Lehigh Valley Contest Award Show will actually be broadcast live on WFMZ this year. So if you're available tomorrow evening, check it out. I'm also pleased to present that the Emmaus High School Steel Hornets robotics team hosted the first Tech Challenge state qualifier on February 15th and 16th. That was held here at Emmaus High School. The Steel Hornets, as always, are advancing to the state competition that's later this month, and we'd like to wish a special thank you to LVHN. They actually brought out their Da Vinci 3D surgical system that they were able to demonstrate to students how robotics is used in the surgery process for today. Also, congratulations to Emmaus's Alyssa Burkhart. She was recently selected as the Coordinated Health Athlete of the Week. She scored a career-high 26-point basketball game with a school record of 7 3-pointers in her final scholastic game over Whitehall. We'd also like to recognize our December LCTI Students of the Month, Peter Baxter, for advertising and commercial art. He was also one of our students who placed at the Skills USA competition. Also like to recognize Claire Collum from the Early Care and Education of Young Children. She was the December LCTI Student of the Month, as well as Gabe Helmer from Heating, Air Conditioning, and Refrigeration, and Ruel Jardine from Hospitality Services. We'd also like to recognize Ryan Himes, who's a senior, Cooper Hallman, also a senior, and Elias Gopin, an 8th grader. They will be obtaining the rank of Eagle Scout, and the Troop 421 will be recognizing these students at an Eagle Court of Honor reception on March 15th. And I believe several of us from the district will be attending, so that will be exciting. I remind the community that the East Penn International Fair will be held this Saturday, the 29th, from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the high school cafeteria. We've talked about this before. It's a final reminder and call to the community. Come on out. There really will be something fun for family members of all ages. The senior signs, which are facilitated or sold through the East Penn Education Foundation, are on sale now, and they will continue to be available through May 21st, 2020. And that's a great way to celebrate the graduation of seniors in our community. On the line of the East Penn Education Foundation, we're pleased to announce that our 4th Innovator Gala will be held on May 26th at Bear Creek Resort from 6 to 9 p.m. And our theme this year will be celebrating the arts in East Penn through the theme of A Night of Inspiration. Information and tickets can be found on our foundation website. And please consider joining us for a night filled with student music, theater performances, as well as a student art auction. So it really is, again, an evening to continue to showcase and celebrate the arts in East Penn. A final reminder, actually not a final one, but there's one more board meeting in March where I'm going to remind our community that kindergarten registration will be happening at each of our elementary schools during the week of March 23rd. We ask that families of 5-year-olds who will be joining us in August of 2020, please go online starting next week and complete the registration process online prior to then coming to our schools the week of the 23rd. If there are any questions, don't hesitate to contact a building and we will be happy to walk you through the process. And finally, I'd like to share some exciting information about one of our school board members. I want to first start off by talking a little bit about Future Ready Schools. That began as a project of the Alliance for Excellent Education, which is a national policy, practice, and advocacy organization that's dedicated to ensuring that all students graduate from high school ready for success in life. Future Ready Schools has quickly become the nation's largest network of innovative and passionate educators. One of the many activities that Future Ready Schools offers is a series of leadership strands that's dedicated to supporting educators in the planning and implementation of meaningful learning opportunities for students. And these leadership strands include district leaders, building leaders, technology leaders, instructional coaches, librarians, and just recently, Future Ready Schools has announced that they will be adding a board member strand. And so I'm really proud to recognize Adam Smith, one of our school board members, for being invited to participate on the advisory board for your Future Ready School Board strand. And this is a tremendous opportunity for Future Ready in terms of having Adam's experiences and expertise. And I really feel as if this is a great opportunity for our board as well as for our school community to learn as well from Adam and his experiences. And so he's kindly agreed to periodically provide us with an update. So I just wanted to publicly congratulate him and say that we really look forward to some exciting work ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments on Mrs. Campbell's report? Okay. Then moving on, we have a discussion of another go at the student-teacher calendar draft. We had a lengthy discussion last meeting. There are minor changes. I don't know if there are any other comments people want to make before voting on it at the next board meeting. Mr. Champagne.
Yeah, I just have one. I recognize that there's a series of compromises that have to be made when putting together a calendar, and I appreciate some of the movement that was made in the calendar. I'm just wondering though, because I brought this up where you combining some of the half-days into a single day, and I recognize that it makes it very tight if we end up with 3 snow days and we hit the state minimum. But one day that just kind of strikes me as being out there is May 7th. I'm just wondering if we can't push that professional development day to sometime in June, and because in that time frame is when a lot of those kids are studying for advanced placement tests and tests are being, they're getting ready for finals, and I just see a half day in the middle of May, whether that can be accommodated, that would be my only comment. It would be nice not to have that one half day there. It's close enough to the end of the year, and I was just wondering if that could be moved as a professional development day until after school's out. Thank you.
Okay. Other comments from the board? Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, Dr. Levinson.
Yeah, I know part of the discussion was about trying to find additional days within the school year in order to find places for potential snow days. And I think, part of the discussion was possibly making April 5th an additional backup day within the school year. I'm personally in support of that, if we can pull in some additional time within the school year as opposed to tacking it on the end. I'm not sure how the rest of the board feels about that, but I'd just like to make that statement.
Dr. Munson?
I'll agree. I mean, I had said that I agree with what Dr. Levinson said. It is, I recognize that the administration at this point is not recommending that course of action, but I would be in support of adding that. I think that April 5th provides far more educational opportunity for makeup than does the middle of June in a week that is also segmented, from everything else. So I would be in support of adding April 5th as a potential snow makeup day after the 3 built-in days and the April 1st day have been used.
Any other comment? Mr. Champagne?
I forgot to mention that. I did see that in the memo, and I would be in favor of doing as many days as we can pull in, the better. So if that's one of the compromises, I would be for that, to add that additional snow makeup day in the school year versus at the end of the year.
Any other comments? Okay, thank you.
I've got one. I'm just curious. I don't disagree with anything that's been said. I guess I'd be curious to hear what the staff and the teachers have to say about that and the suggested changes. Like I said, I don't disagree with making the moves, but is that, we have a perspective up here. Do the individuals who are actually here and would need to come in or, have the makeup days, what's their perspective on these changes?
So when we talk to a lot of people and we get the feedback when we bring the calendar forward. And so based on that, I think overall people do like having that break that's in there. And it really would be the 5th makeup day. So with that said, we came forward with a recommendation with kind of feedback from a lot of others, suggesting to keep that in there. But at this point, I hear 3 people prefer to add that as a 5th makeup day. So if we have any other direction, we're happy to make that move if we want to.
I will share that at one point, for those board members who were with us, you might recall that had, in some years, that was a snow makeup day. From the district's perspective, we did tend to see far more student absences than we would typically see. I will share it also tends to be a day then when we see many professional staff absences as well. And so it really was, at one point, the feedback that we had from the board was a desire to potentially not take holidays and turn those days off and use them as snow makeup days. But if there seems to be a different sentiment now, then certainly, we can consider that.
Ms. Bowman?
I'm fine with having it or not having it. I have a completely different suggestion. What if we just lose that as a day off, and that way we can combine some of the half days? It buys us a little cushion.
Move on.
So, or we can try that next year. I understand that that's a little disruptive.
Any other comments? I'll just add, I'm fine with the calendar the way it is. I mean, we basically only have 2 days that are frozen for the holiday. And I know previously when I was on the board, there was a push to say, give us some holiday that's fixed. So I'm fine with the calendar as is. I would not vote against it if the majority of the board wanted it differently, but I'm fine, and I guess I'd be on board with Ms. Bowman as hope for things on the next year. Anyway, any other comments? Thank you. Okay. Moving on to personnel items. May I have a motion for items 1 through 10, which includes the Exhibit A.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Mrs. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
Dr. Munson?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Winch?
Aye.
Dr. Bacher?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Motion passes. Moving on to business operations. May I have a motion for the, approve the bill list?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Mrs. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
Dr. Munson?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Abstain.
Ms. Winch?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Dr. Bacher?
Aye.
8 ayes, 1 abstain.
Motion passes. Now entertainment, if there are no objections to taking items B through G in a combined motion.
So moved. Second.
Is there any discussion? Mr. Champagne?
Yeah, a couple of questions. With respect to items E and F, F and G, how are those numbers relative to the budget that we have for those two replacement items?
I'll address it. They actually came in slightly above the budget that we had in the capital plan.
When you say
Which
slightly, what does that mean?
I believe one was 20,000 and one was 5,000. Which has caused us to pause and say, it's probably time to freshen up the numbers in the plan. Those were numbers that have been in there for maybe 2 years. And so we're looking at the plan saying, well, when we put numbers in, obviously we need to freshen those.
Every year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For instance, the roofs, we put those in 2 or 3 years ago. We've talked about, we probably just need to put an inflation factor in up front so that we're sort of seeing a number that we might expect in the year that,
Okay.
okay?
Do we have other big elements that are going to be replaced this year that we could see overruns again relative to what's in the plan?
I believe, I would have to defer to Mr. Anushko, but I believe that the other items have come in relatively close to budget or under budget.
But are there some items coming up that are sizable, like these are several $100,000 items?
You know,
Is there anything else that's of that magnitude where we could see a $20,000 pickup?
The other project that has the most value for we've taken over at Iron, we have $106,000 budgeted for that. That went out for bid. We expect to have bid back in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
That's the next largest project this year, yeah.
Yeah, it would be helpful when we see these, if we could have an understanding of what the variance is to what we budgeted, so we kind of have an understanding of where we're going, if we're suddenly, seeing our capital budget getting, whittled down quicker than we anticipated.
sure.
And then the other question I had is, for some of these contracts, we actually see the contract, but for these awards, we don't see the contract. And I'm trying to figure out why we don't see the contract along with the award. I mean, when we approved the recent purchase of the property, we saw the contract. We approved the Apple computers, we see the contract. But here we don't see the contract, and I guess the question is why?
Mr. Fisher, can you speak to that?
No. I'm not being a wise guy. I answered that. I think historically on these building projects, you haven't seen, historically, the board hasn't seen the actual contract document itself. I can tell you that it is internally reviewed by the administration, by the, whichever outside consultant is involved, and then more importantly, by myself.
I understand all that. I guess
You don't see the 20 pages that come with it.
I guess I'm just, there's a level of consistency. Either we see all agreements or we just see, that's more my issue. Are we going to be consistent? If we're seeing contracts and we're approving contracts, should we see all the contracts or we just see some of the contracts? And I guess my opinion would be we get to see all the contracts. We're going to
Are
have to
there
approve them.
some contracts that are required by law to be?
No,
approved?
I mean,
Okay.
I'll certainly talk with you, trying to show you those.
All right, appreciate it.
Actually including them as well.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Mrs. Allen, can you call the roll for items B through G?
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
Dr. Munson?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Winch?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Dr. Bacher?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Motions pass. Finally, in business operations, may I have a motion for item H?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Dr. Munson?
It's not discussion, it's a question. As I read this, we're basically,
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Sorry, before we have the discussion, there's an amendment. Our solicitor has recommended that we not only list the bid alternates that are approved, or that are being requested, but we list the ones that are not being requested in a negative manner. So the revised motion will have the bid alternates 1, 2, 4, 4A, 4B, and 7, and have, we are not accepting the other bid alternates. So if you recall, there was a whole list of bid alternates that we requested, and I'm assuming it's just for clarity in what is being approved, that we actually say we are specifically not requesting the bid alternates that we're not requesting.
Essentially, what the motion would be revised to also include language that says, and specifically reject alternates 3, 3A, 5, 6A, 6B, and 8. That way there is perfect clarity that we're not accepting those proposed alternates.
I apologize. Can we have this as a friendly amendment for the person who proposed and seconded? Is that the way to do that?
That's acceptable.
That's fine, yeah, that's fine. No,
Okay,
no.
so
I thought that's what we were doing to begin with, so.
Yeah.
Yes.
thought-
So the motion on the table is the revised amendment specifically indicating the bid alternates that are not being requested also. Any further discussion? So you were,
No,
someone was having a comment? Someone had a comment?
I thought,
Well, actually, my
Oh.
question, I was going to raise a question, which is, in which this amendment is germane, because as I read this contract, it didn't seem like we were actually committing to these. We were simply committing to being able to add these at the given price. Isn't that what the word alternate means?
No.
And it says the owner shall have the right to accept or reject any or all of the following alternates?
When we requested the bids, when we award the contract, we have in the motion which alternates we're accepting and the price. So,
I see, yes. Okay, thank you.
so as
Yes,
of tonight,
I was
we would
not-
have the
I was not
option of,
correlating the, yes, thank you. That's what I wanted to know. Okay.
are there any other questions or comments? Mrs. Allen, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
Dr. Munson?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Winch?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
aye.
Dr. Bacher?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Motion passes. Moving on to educational conferences, may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Mrs. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
Dr. Munson?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Winch?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Dr. Bacher?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Motion passes. Other educational entities, we have 3 budgets. First up is the CLIU budget. Ms. Bowman, do you want to say anything about it before we?
Yeah, I was going to, and now I can't find my cheat sheet, but I'm going to go off the top of my head, apparently. So the CLIU budget has a small increase over last year. Because I don't have my cheat sheet in front of me, I believe it's like $60,000 or $70,000 more than the year before. And that is mostly due to like the usual pension and salary increases. And the district contribution actually went down. tiny little bit, and I mean aggregate of all the districts together, those district contributions went down a tiny little bit. Our specific contribution will obviously depend on how many students we refer over there. So anyway, Dr. Ibe is very conservative and has done a really good job of holding the district contribution steady for year after year after year and not raising costs on us. So I am for their budget.
For any discussion? Dr. Levinson?
I just have a general question about this and then the other two in terms of what the district has done in terms of incorporating estimated numbers in the preliminary budget. For the CLIU, LTRI-C, and LCTI, our district contributions to these budgets, how are they represented in the preliminary budget that you worked out?
Yes, I budget just exactly what you see in their proposals.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Anything else? Mrs. Allen, will you call the roll, please? What?
There was no motion.
There wasn't a motion?
No.
Oh, sorry, thank you. May I have a motion then on this?
So moved.
Had a motion before the discussion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, now, any more discussion on the motion? Mrs. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
Dr. Munson.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Ms. Winch.
Aye.
Ms. Bowman.
Aye.
Mr. Byrd.
Aye.
Mr. Champagne.
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski.
Aye.
Dr. Levinson.
Aye.
Dr. Bacher.
Aye.
9 ayes.
The motion passes. Next, we have the Lehigh-Carbon County College. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. We do have our representative, Ms. Thompson, here to answer any questions and maybe to say a few words.
Thank you. I'm happy to actually get to address you since I don't normally get to address you. And I'm sure that you all got at least a digital copy of the budget book.
Yes.
Which exactly explains what the college is all about. I wish to tell you the thing that I think that is most important about Lehigh Carbon Community College is that our underlining always what is best for students is what we do. That isn't always the case in all organizations, but at LTRI-C, what is best for students is what we do. In terms of the budget, since some of you are not here when I was here, the way it was set up for the community college was a third of the money to run the college was to come from the school districts because the school districts, in our instance, own the community college. A third was to come from the students and a third to come from the state. And at the present time, because we are fully aware of your difficulty managing finances, the amount that the school districts provide for the community college is 10.9%. And we have consistently held what we're asking the school districts at the current rate for quite a number of years. The only reason that a school district's amount that they contribute would vary is because of the number of students that actually attend the school. This year, what we're asking you has increased by $5,915, which is a 0.7% increase. So it isn't really like we're asking for a lot more money. And we do an amazing work. We deal with many students. As you can see in the front of the book, the number of students, the students that come to our school, we have a great variety of students. What I'd like to really mention is the early college program. East Penn has really increased the number of students that we have in dual enrollment, which is excellent for the students and for their parents, and for their parents' pocketbook, actually. And in the dual enrollment program, basically, Jennifer Aquila is the person who's over that with the community college. She would make sure that East Penn students are receiving all the credits that they need to graduate from East Penn. At the same time, they would be taking L-Tri-C courses, either the dual enrollment or they would be actually at the college, so that when they graduate from East Penn, they get an associate degree from the community college. And this year, the amount for the fall is $2,220 for the fall semester. So there are numerous reasons why people would be interested in the early college program. First of all, you save 2 years of college if you're interested in that. Second of all, there's the money aspect of it. Thirdly, you have the college experience when you go on to the four-year school that you'd like to go on to. And they found in this program that there are students who attend the early college program who aren't going on to a four-year school. They're going on to the police academy, or they're going into some technical field that they need an associate degree. So I wanted to tell you about the early college program. A number of school districts are participating. It's really an honor to serve on this board because really what's best for students comes first, and we have some outstanding students. As you may recall, one of our East Penn graduates was one of the Pennsylvania Scholars last year. She's going to Yale free. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did anybody have any questions?
Any questions from Ms. Thompson? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate hearing every year about programs that are assisting our students in their future. Thank you. Mrs. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Winch?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
Dr. Munson?
Aye.
Dr. Bacher?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Motion passes. Moving on to LCTI budget. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Does one of our representatives want to?
Yes, the budget this year went up a little over 2% overall. The contribution from East Penn went up about a little over 3%, and that has to do with the fact that the allocation of costs are split between the enrollment in the by district on a 5-year weighted average, as well as the market value of the properties within the district. So our expenditures for next year in the general operating budget are up a little over 3%. It's roughly about $80,000 more than we spent last year. On the academic center side, the districts also saw a slight increase, but that academic center budget is much smaller than the operating budget for the institute. Our overall increase is about $12,000 for this coming year. But all in all, I think the administration up there has done a good job of balancing the costs. They do have increasing teacher costs with the new contract, as well as pensions with PCERS, but they've really worked hard to look for other sources of revenue through Perkins and other ways in the state to offset some of the impacts to the district. So all in all, I think they did an excellent job, and it's a good budget.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Champagne? Discussion? Mrs. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
Ms. Winch?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
Dr. Munson?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Bacher?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Motion passes. Moving on to other items. I don't know if you want to say anything?
Yes,
more about-
thank you for the opportunity to speak. I also wanted to thank Mrs. Campbell for her unexpected kind words earlier tonight. Stole a little bit of my thunder, but it is certainly this advisory position is certainly one of great personal and professional pride for myself. So if you all indulge me for a few minutes, I had a statement I'd written up that is posted on my webpage, but I'm gonna share it with you all tonight. And then after I'm done, if you had any questions about what the role entails, obviously I'm just getting my feet wet into this now, so I don't know how many details I'll be able to provide about the role itself, but I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. So I am thrilled and honored to announce an exciting new opportunity for both me personally and for my role as one of East Penn School Board Directors. Last week, I was invited to participate as one of a select group of national advisors to the Future Ready School Board Strand. Future Ready Schools is a project of the Alliance for Excellent Education, a Washington, D.C.-based nonprofit, bipartisan educational organization whose mission is to expand opportunities for all students, especially those from underserved or marginalized communities nationwide. They also represent over 3,400 school districts and 20 million students nationwide. Future Ready School Boards joins the FRS program, Future Ready Schools, strands already underway for district leaders, principals, instructional coaches, librarians, and technology leaders. They will provide a suite of helpful tools and free resources for school board members to connect with their communities, support a culture of innovation within their schools, and promote a vision for teaching and learning that is student-centered, forward-thinking, and designed to meet the vast needs of today's learners. The goal of this strand will be to support superintendents and school boards in working together to ultimately support our learners and create the types of learning experiences today's modern learners need. A key component of the program is the Future Ready School Boards framework, which will help school board members forge a visionary and systemic path to support long-term academic, financial, and political sustainability. Included in the framework are 8 gears focused on personalized instruction for students, ongoing and job-embedded learning, robust infrastructure, strategic fiscal planning, community partnerships, the use of data to transform instruction and support students, support for anywhere, anytime learning, and collaborative leadership. Future Ready Schools prides themselves in ensuring that their work is extremely relevant for today's leaders. I will be serving nationally as one of a group of advisors who will weigh in on the organization's work in the new school board strand and provide insight and guidance into what tools and resources are needed. Advisors will be comprised of select superintendents and school directors from across the country, from California, New York, Ohio, North Carolina, and now Pennsylvania. And from what I'm being told, it's a total of 10 folks between school board members and superintendents. While, of course, as an educator, this is an amazing opportunity to connect my life's work to the work already done by giants in the field of education, to be able to make an even bigger connection to the work we do as a board here in East Penn makes this new opportunity even more meaningful for me. My colleagues on the board currently serve as liaisons to several committees with regular reports at board meetings: Lehigh County Technical Institute, the Kerman-Lehigh Intermediate Unit, and Legislative Affairs. In addition to these reports, I will be sharing the work I do in my advisory role, my new advisory role, and I will seek input from my colleagues in that process. Our work as a board will now have a direct line to the work being done in support of school districts nationally. As part of that direct line, the East Penn School Board will now have access to helpful tools and resources embedded in the school board's framework to do one of 6 different things. Support and communicate a learner-centric vision that provides personal and authentic learning experiences and supports. 2, social, emotional development for all students. 3, adopt curriculum aligned to state standards that ensures deeper learning outcomes connected to real-world applications, promotes positive digital citizenship, and prepares learners for future success. 4, ensure equity and access to high-quality devices and the bandwidth needed to support student learning at school and at home. 5, adopt budgets that align with strategic and tactical plans while working to eliminate expenses that no longer support the district's vision. And 6, adopt clear policies and support practices on the use of student data that ensure high levels of data privacy and security and that adhere to state and federal laws. Finally, Future Ready Schools has already had a direct positive impact on the work done within our schools here in East Penn. Several of our administrative team members have participated in the Future Ready learning sessions over the past 2 years. The learning in these sessions has helped the district as we continue to improve teaching and learning in East Penn. And so, as I said, it's a great honor and privilege to serve as a representative on this panel nationally. And I'm really excited to share the work that we do together here with my colleagues across the country. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them as best I can, but that's my new role, part of it anyway.
And as part of that, much like the legislative updates, when he has input to share, we'll have an item on the agenda.
Yeah, it won't be a
for him to
regular
report.
ongoing, because we're obviously not going to be meeting as frequently as some of the other folks in their updates. So as there's something to share or collect feedback on, I'll be reaching out and that'll appear on the agendas going forward.
Okay, moving forward to announcements, we had an executive session at 7 PM before this meeting, and our next regularly scheduled board meeting will be... Yes, we discussed negotiation and confidential matters. Thank you. Our next regularly scheduled board meeting will be Monday, March 9th at 7:30 here in the boardroom. I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Meeting's adjourned.